In the spring of 1958, the skies above China began to fall silent. The sparrows, once a common sight, fluttering between trees and rooftops, were vanishing. It wasn't nature that silenced them, it was a decree. Chairman Mao Zedong, leader of the People's Republic of China, had declared them the enemy of the state. He blamed them for stealing grain, for threatening the food supply of a rising communist nation, and so the people were called to arms, not against the foreign invaders, but against birds. The campaign was hailed as patriotic, revolutionary, necessary. But it was none of those things. It was a catastrophe. By trying to reshape nature through sheer political will, unleashed consequences it never anticipated. Within months the skies were clear, and the crops were not. The insects came next, and soon after came the famine. This is the story of how a campaign to kill birds helped cause one of the deadliest famines in human history. In 1958, China stood at a crossroads. The Communist Party, under Chairman Mao, had consolidated power after years of civil war and revolution. China was gripped by a grand vision. Chairman Mao Zedong had launched the Great Leap Forward, a radical plan to transform the nation from an agrarian society into a communist superpower. Its goals were enormous: to double steel production, to collectivise agriculture, and to outpace the West in just a few years. To achieve this, the party mobilised every man, woman and child. Backyard furnaces were lit in towns and villages across the country. Farmers became factory workers overnight. Fields were reorganised into massive communal farms. Propaganda declared, man can conquer nature. And so the government tried. One of the first battles in this war against nature came in the form of hygiene and pest control. And in 1958, a new campaign began, the Four Pests Campaign. The pests were rats, carriers of diseases, flies, symbols of filth, mosquitoes, spreaders of malaria, and sparrows, accused of eating precious grain. While the first three seemed like typical public health targets, the fourth was different. Sparrows, particularly the Eurasian tree sparrow, were insectivores. They ate crops damaging pests as well as grain. But to Mao and his advisors, science was no match for ideology. It was a war declared on nature. Mao was told that each sparrow ate several kilograms of rice per year, enough to feed a person. The simple, flawed calculation was accepted as fact, and so, in one sweeping decree, the sparrows became a class enemy. They would need to be exterminated. The idea fit the revolutionary spirit of the time. Humans united under socialism would reshape the world. Even nature would be forced to obey. Loudspeakers cackled with the slogans, "Eradicate the four pests, protect the grain, destroy the sparrows." It was a patriotic duty, a revolutionary act to kill the birds. Across cities and countryside, the entire population joined in. Schools closed for sparrow hunts, workers left their posts, families gathered in courtyards and fields, clanging pots and pans to drive the sparrows into flight. The goal was simple: keep the birds in the air until they died of exhaustion. Nesting sites were destroyed. Trees were stripped bare. Children climbed rooftops to crush eggs and hatchlings. Villages competed over kill counts. Local officials inflated numbers to please their superiors. In Beijing alone, over 200,000 sparrows were reportedly killed in a single day. In one incident, flocks of exhausted sparrows sought refuge at the Polish embassy. Refusing to allow the Chinese crowds into diplomatic soil, the embassy staff found themselves besieged until Chinese authorities reportedly ordered them to open their gates. The birds were beaten to death inside. Mao's government printed posters celebrating the slaughter. Children were praised in newspapers for their enthusiasm and efficiency. To question the campaign was to question the revolution itself. But nature does not bend to slogans. Within weeks, sparrow populations collapsed. The skies fell quiet, and for a moment, it seemed like victory. Grain stores were safe, fields were peaceful, but below the surface, the balance had been broken. Sparrows had eaten grain, yes, but they had also eaten insects. Locusts, caterpillars, and other crop-devouring pests had lost a natural predator. Without the sparrows, they multiplied in swarms. Within months, the crops were under a new threat, one that pots and pans could not scare away. The war on sparrows had been won, but the war on famine was only just beginning. By the end of 1958, the sparrows had gone. Entire populations had been wiped out, not just reduced, but annihilated. But nature does not tolerate imbalance. Without sparrows, the pest populations exploded. The most devastating of all were the locusts. With no natural predators left, they bred freely and swept across the country in dark clouds. Fields that once held promise were eaten to the ground in hours. Armyworms, borers, and other crop-feeding insects surged in number. Diseases spread more easily, and the people, already stretched thin by the demands of the Great Leap Forward, could do little to stop it. The loss of the sparrows was only one part of the growing disaster. Communal farming inflated production numbers, and misguided agricultural experiments had already weakened China's food security. Crops were planted too densely, fields were overworked, still production had been prioritised over harvesting. But now, what little remained in the fields was being devoured by insects. The Four Pests Campaign had not increased yields, it had shattered ecosystems. By 1960, even the government could no longer ignore the crisis. Scientists pleaded with leadership. They explained the mistake. Sparrows were not the enemy, they had been allies, and so, in a quiet reversal, the government ended the war on birds. New posters were printed, the sparrow was quietly removed from the lists of pests. Bedbugs replaced it. But the damage had already been done. The insect plagues continued, and the harvests failed. What followed was not silence, what followed was hunger. By the end of the 1960s, the dream of the Great Leap Forward had become a nightmare. With ecological collapse came starvation. Entire provinces ran out of food. Villagers ate bark, leaves, and clay. Reports of cannibalism surfaced. But speaking of famine was dangerous. Local officials, fearing punishment, reported false success, claiming record harvests even as people starved in the fields. The government exported grain to maintain international appearances. Inside China, tens of millions were hungry. This was not a famine caused by drought or war, it was man-made, a perfect storm of ideology, bad science, and political fear. Between 1959 and 1961, it's estimated that between 15 to 45 million people had died. Most historians settle on the figure around 30 million. Entire families vanished, whole villages became silent. The famine remains one of the worst in human history. And behind it, a symbol as small as a bird, whose destruction helped trigger a collapse far bigger than anyone had imagined. In later years, Mao would admit to mistakes, but never publicly accepted responsibility for the famine. The state buried the story. For decades, the full truth was hidden, spoken only in whispers or preserved in memories of the survivors. But the legacy remains. A single policy, a war on birds, helped unravel the fabric of life in rural China. The Four Pests Campaign, born of revolutionary zeal, had ended not in victory, but in death. Today, the war on sparrows is remembered as one of history's most tragic environmental mistakes. A decision made with confidence, executed with fever, and paid for with millions of lives. It is a lesson in unintended consequences, a lesson in what happens when ideology overtakes science, when dissent is silenced, and when nature is treated as an enemy to be conquered, rather than a system to be understood. In modern China, official history still treads carefully around the famine. The full story is not widely taught. Discussions remain sensitive, but among historians, ecologists, and those who study authoritarian systems, the Four Pests Campaign stands as a chilling reminder that even small creatures play a vital role in ecosystems, that policy without evidence can be deadly, that silencing expertise and amplifying fear can sow disaster on an unimaginable scale. The birds that once flew over China were not enemies of the people, they were part of a balance that, when destroyed, brought suffering to millions. The sparrows have returned to China, but the echoes of their absence still resonate. This was not just a story of birds, it was a story of human ambition, of control pushed too far, of a nation that mistook domination for progress, and of the price we all pay when we forget that nature too has a voice and a limit.